Okay, I'm Jean Wilcox, candidate for mayor, and I apologize for having to miss the October 4th candidate forum. I had another event scheduled and I just couldn't be there. So I'll address the first question, which was whether or not I would be in favor of a $30,000 economic impact study regarding the golf course. It had multiple questions to it, but I'll try to hit all of them. The golf course is a big investment for the city, and it's a recreation asset for us, but it's an expensive one. We have all forms of recreation here. Some people like pickleball, some people like hiking, some people like tennis, some people like to play on volleyball leagues, some people like to play golf. And it's pretty typical for cities to have a municipal golf course. However, we all know that our golf course in recent years has not been making money. And that's one reason the city went out to find a golf company like Billy Casper Golf to operate the golf course for us. The revenues over or under expenditures have gotten a little better since Billy Casper took over. In other words, we're not losing as much money. And the data I've seen on the use of the golf course is looking pretty good. They have been able to increase the number of plays, so that's good. They're doing a good job of operating it. But at the same time, the city is subsidizing the operation. For example, this budget year, we budgeted $30,000 to help them with operating expenses. We also bought $500,000 of golf carts, but all of the revenue from the rentals of those golf carts comes back to the city. All the expenditures and all the revenues go to the city. We just have a contract with Billy Casper. I think an economic impact study is worth doing because it would help us understand how many people come in from outside the community, where they spend their money, what kind of sales tax revenue are we earning from it, from their visits, and bed tax revenue. And it's all about the sales tax and the bed tax. Now, Billy Casper presented a report to the council a few weeks ago, and they said they gave us the economic impact in the $500,000 range for the number of resident plays and the number of non-resident plays, which was all very impressive. But to me, it's all about the sales tax because that's what supports the city operations. Should we continue subsidizing them? Well, we need to take a closer look at that. The subsidies they get are in the form of the city maintaining the greens and all the facilities, including the restaurant facility and golf carts and the Centennial Center. So we have a lot of staff. We have 9 full-time staff devoted to that. The loan is really a loan on paper. It's not a real loan, and it's not really being paid back. I would say leave it there for future reference when we get to the point of talking about selling the golf course, which I think we need to look at. As long as it's kept available and open to the public, I don't see a reason why the city should not sell it to a private operator. I don't think it's going to affect the homes around it as long as the conditions of sale are that it remain a golf course and it remain open to the public. It should be self-sustaining. That's the whole idea of an enterprise fund, but the city's not following its own rules there because we're subsidizing it. So I think that answers the first question. The second one had to do with the annexation of 55 or so acres outside the city limits, south of the city, off of Senator Highway. Of course, the first thing I would want to look at is what does our general plan say for that area? And I certainly would like a lot more detail than what was provided, but that's okay. I understand you can't lay out the whole scenario for us. So, the devil is often in the details on those kinds of things, and the Planning and Zoning Commission is a very important body to ask those kinds of questions of the developers. Exactly what do you intend to build? What will it look like? What is the traffic impact? What kind of services will be required? The big question for us as a city council is whether or not an annexation like that can be provided the services within our current resources. Especially when we look at all of the other annexations that are coming before us, we're beginning to see now, and the public is getting very concerned about whether or not the city can provide services within our current budget. The answer to that is no. We would have to have an increase in police officers and firefighters, and it would have an impact on our recreation services. And my position is that if there is any upsizing required in our water, sewer lines, or street system, the developer should pay for that, not the taxpayers who are here already and have been paying into the system. We do have impact fees for water and wastewater, but they do not nearly cover the cost of the upsizing. A traffic study for that area would definitely be needed. Senator Highway has a lot of traffic going up and down to the hiking areas, the residential areas up there, Goldwater Lake, and it's also along a valuable historic street in Prescott. So we need to understand how much traffic going in and out. And the configuration of the annexation is a little odd. I noticed that one little tail of it is connected by one line. Unless it's contiguous to the city boundary, we would not be able to annex it. So I think a little more detail on that would be helpful. One person, I think it was Connie Cantelmi, made note of the fact that the houses to be built there, because of the terrain, would be very valuable, probably in the $500,000 to $600,000 range, and the property tax revenue generated from that would be significant. Well, the bad news is that our property tax rate is so low. If you figure a $200,000 house, the taxes that come to the city are $60 a year. That's not very much, and it's not nearly enough to cover the cost of increasing the services. So the third question then had to do with whether or not I would be in favor of turning the airport into a regional airport. That makes sense to me. Prescott is a small city, and the airport is expensive for us to operate, especially since we know now we need to lengthen the runway, we need to strengthen the runway, and we definitely need a new terminal. I think we've gone too many years with a conglomeration of mobile homes as a terminal. It's never going to be a Falcon Field, a heavy freight airport, but we know that it's going to be a regional serve the region. And it makes sense to me that we have regional partners to participate financially in the support of the airport. But we have to be able to tell the partners, Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, the county, what they're going to gain out of it if we expect them to contribute financially. So that's going to take some thought, and I personally would not rely on creating an airport authority through the mechanism of intergovernmental agreements, because IGAs are really nothing more than gentlemen's agreements. They can be easily broken with no legal consequence. And what I think we really need is statutory authority to create an airport authority with a separate governing board, which means the city of Prescott is going to have to give up some control and share it with our financial partners. So these are serious things to think about, but I think definitely worth exploring. And also keep in mind that Embry-Riddle is an important partner, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. So the fourth question had to do with setting aside $100,000 to fund a business incubation center and promote economic development in the city. I'm very much in favor of a business incubation center. After spending some time talking with Jim Robb, our economic development consultant, and learning about what business incubation centers do in other cities, we have so many talented, bright, young people here in Prescott, believe it or not, even among the sea of gray that you see out there, especially out of Embry-Riddle, who have wonderful ideas that need further business development to research the marketability, the feasibility, and we have a lot of mentors here, retirees who have valuable corporate experience who could help them. They just need a place to be with resources like computers and desks and electronics and so forth to connect them, give them the tools. And I think it's a good idea. As far as other economic development efforts, definitely. We cannot compete with other cities to attract new business and industry unless we offer incentives, and we need money to do that. But because it's a public investment, I think we need to have them demonstrate what the return on that investment will be to us, to the taxpayers. And that's one reason I was pushing for an economic development incentives policy, which the council finally adopted a couple of months ago. And it does require a return on investment assessment or statement from the proposed business or industry, and we would have a third party evaluate that, verify it, and then report to the council. The fifth question really was a list of legislative agenda items, and I agreed with the other council people at the council meeting that I think the number one priority is restoring the city's ability to add impact fees. And the idea proposed was to add that to utility rates. I think that we need impact fees on new developments. Putting them on utility rates would impose a burden on everybody else who's already been paying for those services. But we definitely need impact fees so that new development will be contributing toward not only the capital improvements of public safety, recreation, library, but also the operating expenses. And that's a challenge, and as Phil Good pointed out, we lost our ability to impose most of our impact fees in the past during the recession because housing sales were down, and impact fees do add on to the sale of a house. But when people are looking at a house to buy, they're much more engaged in the location, the type of house, whether it's what they want, and then they figure out, will it fit in their budget? So it makes sense to me that the purchaser or the developer pay those impact fees, not the current taxpayers. One other legislative item has to do with the pension fund. There were multiple aspects to that question. I'm not sure about having the state treasurer manage a pension fund. Certainly now the state treasurer is responsible for managing state funds and does a good job. But we also have, on the other hand, the Arizona State Retirement System, which is managed by an appointed board, and they've been doing a great job. The Arizona State Retirement System is one of the best in the country. But the difference is, from PSPRS, it's structured differently. So the problem is in part management by the appropriate body, who's knowledgeable and accountable, and the other part is changing the PSPRS system so that it's structured differently. Right now it's just not sustainable. And I really don't want to see the men and women at the end of the line, in other words, the younger employees, lose out because the system totally runs out of money. So we've really got to put our heads together on reforming the PSPRS system. Having the city manage the PSPRS fund? No, absolutely not. That becomes way too political. There's a similar problem that exists by having a local PSPRS board make decisions on who's eligible to join and who's not. I don't think that our local board should be making those kinds of decisions. It's too hard for an individual who's been in the community to look at someone face to face and say, no, you're not eligible. And they really need to be focused on what's in the best interest of maintaining the sustainability of the system for everyone as a whole. Another item on the legislative agenda has to do with HERF funds. I think we need some kind of law that guarantees distribution to local governments, and that would be cities, towns, and counties, of a share of the HERF funds. You know, in the past, when the state has had a budget problem, they sweep those HERF funds right back into the state treasury, and that leaves us with a deficit or ways to come up to have to cut our own budgets. Not fair, because we all pay those HERF taxes, those taxes at the gas pump, and they're intended to be supporting all of our road system, whether it's local, state, county. It all connects together. The other two items were not really discussed at the mock council meeting. One was whether or not we should seek authorization to allow cities to impose a sales tax at sales at nonprofit bookstores. I would not touch that one. I don't think it's important enough to get in front of the legislature. It doesn't affect that many people. And I know we have a lot of thrift stores run by nonprofits in Prescott, but I just don't think the volume of their business is going to make that much of a difference to the city coffers. Not worth pursuing. And nonprofits exist to serve people often who aren't served by government anyway. And another item that wasn't really discussed was allowing the city to protect and maintain the city's established alternative surface and groundwater supplies. That could set off a whole new water war. The 1980 Groundwater Management Act took decades to pass in the legislature. There are some problems with our water laws. Certainly there's a disconnect between surface water and groundwater, and our alternative water system is a paper accounting system that really is kind of fictional, but it seems to work okay. It requires us to manage and allocate a limited amount each year, so we can try to reach the goal of having a sustainable water supply. It's a start. It might need some refinement, but again, I don't think that one is worth bringing to the legislature. But one item I would like to see come up on our agenda is giving cities, towns, and counties the authority to create an airport authority as a separate unit of government, so that we're not relying on IGAs. And further discussion needs to be had on whether it should be its own taxing authority. Like hospital districts have the ability to tax, but we happen to have one here in Prescott that does not use its taxing authority. It contracts with a nonprofit entity which seems to manage it quite well. So that is the possibility, to have an airport authority that doesn't tax. That would be the best of all worlds, because we do have the ability to get right now 90 to 95% funding from the federal government, along with some funding from the state. So, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate the opportunity to throw in my responses to some of these questions. again, I apologize I wasn't able to be there on October 4th, but just a little conflict in schedule.
No worries. One thing I do want to make public on the video, and that is that the annexation you were talking about, as we said very clearly, is totally fake. It was just there to open the door to a discussion about developments and annexations in general. So nobody needs to worry. This is not another annexation coming down the pipe. So
Okay.
okay, thank you.